Hello, and welcome to another session of the Empowered Parents series. My name is Claire Thomas. I am an educator, an advocate for early learning and early childhood education, and I am also the founder of Early Intellect, your partner in nurturing early literacy at home. I'm excited to bring you another episode where I am talking to parents and families about their experiences with the school system, their experiences on their early learning journey with their kids. And today I have two special guests joining me, Eric and Petrea, my cousins, and they're going to be sharing a little bit about their journey with their children's education and what it's been like for them. So would you guys mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your children?
Go ahead, boo.
I'm Petrea Simpson. I am mom of a very gifted 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old little girl who you see here, who is not letting me be great.
I'm Dad, Eric Simpson, of the same two children, EJ, who's 5, and Amari, who is 2. Two very, very different children as we have and are continuing to learn.
So how would you describe your relationship with EJ's school, the educators that he's had so far, and just the overall experience for you guys? How has it been?
I think it's been a wonderful relationship with his school. So much so that we both really, really love the school that he's at. I'll be very candid and say that EJ has an IEP. He has some challenges with speech, and he has a speech therapist at school. So to be at an early age where we have a child who has a speech disability or speech deficit entering into a new space with the school, we were definitely worried and concerned about how the reception would be with not only the teaching staff, but also other students. And I know at an early age, bullying isn't a major concern, but it can begin at very early. So those are things that we were concerned about when we got to the school. But his first teacher, Mrs. Duke, has just, I mean, she was phenomenal. She really quelled any anxiety that we had. The speech therapists, they were very communicative about any and all things that he was doing in school. One of the things that I really liked is that both kindergarten teacher, pre-K teacher, as well as the speech therapist, they send home a folder pretty much daily. Sometimes there are updates, sometimes they're not, but that's how we communicate with what's happening, what's happened, what can we do as parents at home to support. And even when we go in the schools to meet with them to ask questions, they're very open and very honest, and they can pretty much answer our questions in full detail. And now that I'm in the school system as a school counselor myself, I have very specific questions that I'm going to ask based off of the work that I'm doing with some of my kids and things that I see happening in the school system that I've been taking, and they've been able to answer those questions as well. So I would say it's been a very positive relationship. I also think that the child that we have and the behaviors that he displayed in school, which were all leadership, um, leading by example, displaying kindness and empathy and sharing, those things naturally help just because there are no behavioral concerns with our child at school.
At school,
So
yeah. I will, of course, echo all that Eric has shared. So I will share that before he became enrolled in public school, he was at a private school for pre-K 3, which was following a very rough start because I was pregnant and was in the hospital a lot that year. And then on his first week of school, I gave birth. So we weren't even able to, walk him into his first day of school. And at that school, we felt very under resourced, and he ended up being asked to leave the school because they said his behavior wasn't, something that they could handle because he kept trying to leave the class because he wanted to come home with us. And they just didn't have a lot of things in place to support him. And what I would think that would have been in place as a therapist myself, and of course Eric, who's a social worker by trade until, for a couple more months he'll be a therapist by trade as well. We just didn't think they had the things in place that they should have had for children who are having a hard time. And I will say that even we experienced a couple of deaths in our family recently. And so one day he went to school and he had a really hard time because he just was really worried about leaving me and really sad. And so they had more supports like the school therapist to come out and talk to him, like the teachers that he's had before that he's had good experiences with. So just seeing the difference on not just an academic level, but a social and emotional level was really helpful too.
Wow. Well, I'm glad he's having, such a good start now, and you guys are having a good experience with the public school system. Like you said, there's places that just don't have, I don't even want to say the capacity, but I guess the resources, but everybody has resources. It's just about how it's being put to use.
Right.
So I'm just glad that he's having a good time now that he's in kindergarten and you guys are having a good first experience with the public school system. What are some of the ways you guys have been able to engage with EJ's schooling, and how do you think it's impacted him educationally?
We had like this mantra of making sure that our kids were well equipped before they got to school, especially being two people in the social services field and knowing about, if your kid isn't reading by the third grade, especially as a Black son, a Black kid, boy, that they're more likely to be in the prison system later on, right? The school to prison pipeline. So we were very, I guess, eager to teach our children, the things that they need to know ahead of time. And their daycare that they both went to, that they're at right now, my daughter's at right now, also did a lot to prepare the kids. So EJ was reading by 3. He knew his numbers and shapes and colors and all that type of stuff way before kindergarten. And so I think it helped with making sure that he's on track. And then and of course, it helps the teachers because they have, I guess, less to do. But even then, I think his pre-K 4 teacher in particular was very astonished when she was like, "Oh, he's reading." And I was like, "Yeah, we said this, right?" And so those are things that are helpful. And then, like Eric said, they do send homework, they have like a homework calendar where they kind of just get to pick and choose which assignments they do now in kindergarten. And then they also send home, especially for the math and the writing, different ways for us to work with them at home, which is really helpful. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking because I feel like I'm taking over.
No, you're not. I mean, I don't build on as we would do at our school, is that some of the habits that we've done naturally supported that. Like at bedtime, we read a story every day, and it's evolved from reading a simple 4 or 5 page book about rhyming words to now reading chapter books with EJ, one chapter a night, or we'll read half a chapter, or so on and so forth. And then it played off of who we are naturally. My wife definitely got us started with the reading. I am not as much a reader, but my subjects that are my forte are math and science. And so any and everything can become a math and or science conversation. So I can vividly remember EJ asking, "Why is the sun like this?" I'll answer the question, and then he'll ask, "Why again?" Keep on going. Why does it rain? And I'll talk about the cycle of precipitation, and then a whole cycle of condensation, evaporation, and then it rains again. And so we have all of these conversations where some of these conversations are definitely higher academic level conversations where he may or may not grasp it now, but it's still not too young to even start initiating that. Even with his vocabulary, EJ can tell you some SAT level words now. He may not be able to tell you what they mean, but he can use them correctly. Um, Naturally there were certain things that we did that were just foundational and just providing and ensuring that our kids are well equipped. And I think that is owed to who we are as people. Naturally, my wife is a reader. My wife is a writer. Naturally, I'm interested more in numbers and the sciences and the music. And so all of the things that we are interested in, or all of the things that we have found to show or provide success for early childhood education, we have been providing for our students, our children, such as the reading, or such as looking at numbers, or such as talking about science. Even when we go on walks, yeah, there are times when we go on walks. Everything is a lesson. Let's look at the leaves. What season are we in? Let's look at the sun. Why is the sun like this? Let's look at the moon. What phase is the moon in? EJ can tell you all his planets. And so those were certain things that we had done just to feel like we were good parents, but then also because of those statistics and understanding the school to prison pipeline and understanding the misnomers and the labels that African American children get, we wanted to ensure that our children weren't going to be those statistics.
I love that. I think people underestimate a lot, just like the power of everyday conversations and just the things that you do daily, naturally, and how it could be so impactful. So I have another question. You guys mentioned EJ reading at 3. I feel like it's a big debate online, with so many early childhood accounts where some people are like, kids should not be reading. They should not be doing any of these activities, using anything other than just like playing before they enter kindergarten, because some parents feel like their child may be bored once they get into school if they're already reading, if they already have all this knowledge. Do you feel like there's been any negative impact from EJ learning how to read early and entering school the way he did? Do you feel like anything negative came from that?
So I think with the first experience, maybe that was why he was kind of bored, because they were doing the things that he already knew. But I don't think we encountered any negativity, because I felt like, well, okay, I've taught him, the basics of like, okay, well, now you know the alphabet, but like, why would I purposely keep my child stagnant, right? So for me, it wasn't like we weren't like shoving anything down his throat, which I think some people think like, oh, you're just making them sit and read note cards all day. And we weren't doing that. It was through play. It was, okay, well, what letter is this while we're reading? Or when we're, eating fruit snacks. Okay, you have 5 fruit snacks. If mommy's gonna take 2 of them, how many do you have left? Right. And so it is through play. So I think it's really important that you do make it fun and not like drilling right into small children. So I think that part of the conversation is important, but also, you know, I think if we had more kids equipped to go into the schools, then maybe our school systems would be more advanced, right? Because we are behind as a US school system, behind most of the other countries that are like, ooh, this sounds really elitist, but like in our playing field, right? Like what's considered third world and things like that, first world countries, which to me is just an elitist type term, but that's neither here nor there. We're not up to par. So maybe if we started doing this, maybe we could be up to par.
The only thing that I could say is negative is, when we're trying to put on something or when we're trying to watch something, we don't want him to know what it is, or we want to surprise him. He's,
Mhm.
oh, you about to put on Paw Patrol too? Yay!
Oh, he
You
already
know,
knows.
yeah, surprise ruin. Or we want to make a Christmas list or something like that. That's the only negative. That's like a fun thing, like a surprise being ruined. I don't think that there's been any academic, behavioral, disciplinary concerns that we've exhibited because of boredom, because he already knows this. EJ, being the oldest child, and now having a younger sibling, tends to want to help others, and so I think it has propelled him in a space where he can feel like he can help other students with identifying different words. Granted, we don't see him in an academic setting, but we always hear all the time how much of a helper he is, how much of a leader he is in school. So having already mastered or is in the process of mastering other things, he can assist other students along the way. And like my wife said, it wasn't like we were just drilling like EJ, we're about to sit down and read this book until this book is finished. No, we read a book until he was done reading. I think I was just alluding to that I feel like the early intervention, regardless of what the intervention is, whether it's in an academic setting, a social emotional setting, or engaging with others and sharing, that the earlier a child can get it or grasp it or be exposed to that, the better it is for the child in the long run, where I don't foresee any negative connotations coming just because of that early engagement.
I completely agree. And I agree with what both of you said, where I think parents are thinking they have to be sitting down. It has to be flashcards, because for a lot of people, that's how they were taught.
Mhm.
But they don't know that it doesn't have to be this way. There's so many ways that learning could be fun. It could be engaging, where your child will actually enjoy it and want to do it, and still benefit from it. And like for the boredom part, if your child has a good teacher, they're going to challenge them. So it doesn't matter if your child comes in already knowing how to read, already knowing how to write, the teacher's going to push them to the next level and push them to the next step. So I agree with both of you that it can only make things better for the child when you start early with their learning. So being that both of you guys are working parents, how do you balance supporting your kids at home with their learning, with everything else that you have to do, everything else that you have going on?
It's a very good question. I would say that
Don't do that.
teamwork makes the dream work. Like, along with being parents, along with being full-time employees, along with having 2 children that are in school, I'm also a graduate student. I'm also a full-time minister, also a full-time musician. And so I have a plate that me and there are some things that she says, okay, I'm gonna take care of this, so you take care of that. or we just find time to make these things happen. The one thing that we do every day is read. Is without fail for bedtime, reading is absolutely going to happen. We're pretty open about what we have going on with our schedules, what different things that we have obligations to, and so we make things work. There are some days where we don't do anything, where it's just let's just come home, we're going to eat dinner, we're going to have a whole fun family fun night. Or other days where academic focus or social learning or emotional learning is what we're going to do pretty much all night. We'll find different ways to make it happen. There's two things that are definitely going to happen when we go home. Bedtime, we read a book and we pray at night. And what we found is that that's one of the things, or that's one of the places where EJ has really excelled at, is because it helped him with that reading, it helped him with that learning. And then with reciting prayer, it helps him with his diction, it helps him with his speaking. And he also, the Lord's Prayer to you right now, it might be choppy, it might be a little hard to understand, but we know what he's saying and we know that he's saying it. And so we work together with making it happen. I'll be the first to say that we're not perfect parents. Every day isn't an academic day where we're focused on reading and or math or learning the clock or learning the time, but we find ways to make sure that we engage or incorporate that in the work that we're doing. Even when we're playing games, sometimes we play Jenga. We know that Jenga is helpful with children with grasping and tactile. It helps them with their hand-eye coordination. With Connect Four, we try to find a fun way to incorporate different things like that. So even when we're having a fun game, we also try to find different ways to incorporate some type of learning activity to it. Granted, it's not every time, but we try to find time to make it where there's some type of learning that's incorporated in the fun that we're having.
I like that you said it's not every day, because it doesn't have to necessarily be every day. It's just about being consistent with doing it. So you say you read every single night. So that's something that's very consistent. And I think for a lot of people, it can be intimidating thinking that every single day they have to do a learning activity. Every single day they have to find time to do this, to do that, where just a few times a week, just for like 10, 15 minutes can make such a big difference.
Absolutely. And I think it's unrealistic for a parent. If this is my schedule, I'm out of the house by 6:30. I'm home by 5:15. Sometimes I gotta cook dinner. Sometimes I'm too tired. Sometimes I even have class myself. When am I gonna have the time to sit down and say, hey guys, we're about to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z, one, two, three. Sometimes as a parent, it's important to prioritize your own self-care so that you can come back and do it another day. And I think that's worth highlighting for all parents, single parents, married parents, co-parents, any and all parents. If you have an empty well, how can you give from an empty well? And so it's important to highlight that it's not every day, because it's not. There are some days where the children should be encouraged and also have the opportunity to engage in independent play. And I think that's something that we prioritize in our house. One, me watching and seeing kids doing it at my school, where I work at a school where there's pre-K 3 through 8th grade, and there's independent work at every level. And seeing the importance of that, it helps with building their independent skills. It helps with building their ability to manage their emotions. It helps with building their ability to problem solve without seeking help. And so those are things that are critically important, where sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional, but without rambling, it can't be every day, because we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves in order to make sure that we have enough to keep on giving every day.
No, balance doesn't exist. I don't think we ever have what we would say a perfect balance. And I think that's really important for, I think, moms to hear, because I think we're often fed this lie, especially in the US, that we can do it all and we just have to do it all by ourselves. And that's just not true. And so I just want to encourage, every parent out there that we can't do it all. That is nothing wrong with having your village step in. So if it's, you call grandma, call Lolly, call whoever, and sit on the phone and talk to them while I finish cooking your dinner, right? Do what you can. And again, just, incorporate in everyday things. Counting up the stairs. We're going to count each step as we walk up, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, again, like you said, just sitting down and like dedicating 30 minutes to like learning.
What resources or tools have you guys found helpful throughout EJ and Amari's early learning journey?
Monster Words was really, really great. So that's one of the helpers that we have for him learning how to read. I always joke and say we keep subtitles on really just to keep teach the kids to learn how to read, but it's also for us. Subtitles like on the TV shows and things. But also that was a really great app because like it was like pairing words together, teaching syllables. They had math and reading, and he loved it, especially before we started letting him play like non-educational video game or like, video games, right? That's like tablet games and things.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really great one. He really wants ABC Mouse, but I just don't like paying for another account when I know that Monster Words already works and you already like it. But he enjoys the learning apps. So that was the app that we found most helpful. Flashcards were okay for like sight words and helping him, of course, like just identifying letters and numbers that were like bigger versus just like when we're reading, which they can be really small. But yeah, I think that's it. That was what we used.
I will also echo Gracie's Corner has been very great as well, especially for Amari. For EJ, we hadn't really been on Gracie's Corner. I forgot what we used, but there was a couple of videos on YouTube that would literally go through the whole alphabet. And it was the whole phonetical alphabet. It wasn't just the letters. It would go with the syllables. It would go with the sounds that it made. And it'll also say words that accompany that letter, that sound. So it really helped teach basic phonics at a very basic level. Gracie's Corner with all the different songs that they have. I mean, I listened to the Happy Birthday song by myself because it's such a hit.
I love the Happy Birthday song.
Yeah.
The only thing about Gracie's Corner, I love them, but their alphabet song is wrong. They say the sounds wrong.
Yes, and the one we used with EJ did do them correctly. Yeah, so we have to play that one, and I think she did another one because the first one is definitely wrong, and the second one I think is a little bit better. But yeah, the one we found, the phonetic, I can't remember what it is, but it's like the alphabet rap. It's somebody looks it up, it might pop up.
I feel like I know what you're talking about. I don't remember the name, but I think I know what you're talking about.
Hey, it's a letter, a vowel in the alphabet.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's really cute, and it's obviously stuck in my head for the last 3 years. So great.
I love teaching. I love teaching alphabet video.
Yes. And then I'm a proponent of saying this. Well, I don't say it, but this is something that I think. I know when I think in terms of like exercising, a lot of people will say that the world is your gym. I think the world can also be your classroom. And I say that to say, especially, and I remember when EJ was in his why phase, when everything was why, to have enough patience to actually answer some of those questions. Granted, we don't have to answer every why question, but to engage in their natural curiosity, even if we don't know it, we have phones, smartphones, tablets, we can Google and get the answers. I think it's so important to take the time to answer that why in that moment. Because again, the world is our classroom, the world is our gym, the world is our place where we can get all of these different lessons. So taking the time to explore all of the different things that are available within your community, or even just when we go out elsewhere. A lot of times when we go on vacation, we'll say, hey, this is where we're going. Sometimes we'll pull up a map and show where we're going, or we'll show the different city. And there's so many different things and different lessons that can come up just from that. And these are things that I'm naturally excited about. Granted, for when the child is a little bit older, so I can go a little bit more in depth with some of the lessons and teaching things that we would do. But I do get excited about making any and all things educationally related.
I agree with that. And like when you're doing that, you're building up his vocabulary, his background knowledge, so that now when he's reading the bigger books and a word comes up, he remembers it and he's associating it with something. So definitely beneficial.
Yes. I remember one time he said, I don't know if he was in punishment or something, but he said, this is insufferable. It's like, where did you get that word from?
Okay, vocabulary.
Right.
Yeah. He wanted some juice, and I wouldn't give him any juice. Yes,
Insufferable. So how do you guys feel about the current state of education today with just everything that's going on, all the new policies, just everything that's happening? How are you guys feeling about it?
It makes me glad that we don't live in certain states. And I have no shame in saying what some of those states are: Florida, Virginia, and Texas specifically. Granted, our child isn't at one of those states. or at that level where some of the things that they are being deprived of matter at this moment. But it makes me worried about what education could look like today, what education could look like 10, 20, and 50 years from now. Um, I'm concerned about the education state we are in now, but what I'm specifically concerned about is the welfare, the education, and the attention that minorities will receive over that same time span. What I'm specifically alluding to is that teaching about African American history has been and is being removed from different schools. And so important lessons about African American history and about the heritage, about where and how people have gotten here, the truth isn't being taught. And there are things that are being fabricated and intentionally being withheld from certain students. I'm concerned because they are, specifically in Texas, school counselors are being seen as obsolete and being removed from the education system. Libraries are being removed, and those libraries are now being detention centers. And so I'm really concerned is that places where an opportunity for change and growth can really happen, there's being a place where there's nothing but stagnant opportunity. And it continues to highlight that prison to pipeline reality that we all know about as African Americans, that others may not know or may be in disbelief about happening. I'm grateful for where EJ is now because I haven't observed any of those practices. I haven't observed um, any facet or any withholding of teaching about true history. Granted, there are things that I would like to see happen more of, but I also haven't seen it happen where I haven't seen it completely. Where he is, I'm content, but I'm just concerned about the education system at large and what the implications are specifically for minorities, Latinx, Hispanics, and Native Americans, and what that looks like for them moving forward.
I echo everything Eric said. Those are all my concerns as well. And of course, just making sure that our kids are equipped with the proper knowledge. It's really sad to hear and see, teenagers who can't read past the first and second and third grade level, right? And I hate to see so many kids just being passed along because of so many unmet educational needs, unmet social and economic needs, people not having food in their homes and people dealing with violence and things like that. And there's just so many things that come into play with our kids learning that people are not cognizant of, and that so many kids who are not in loving homes, or even if they are in loving homes, they're in, unsafe neighborhoods, or, there's so many things that are going on, not having access to proper nutrition, eating Cheetos and what we used to eat as a kid, honey buns for breakfast, right? Like Takis, right? Like I remember my dad getting us honey buns every day for breakfast, and then you're hyped up on sugar, and then you crash and you're tired. So there are just so many things that are happening that people may be aware of or not aware of, but that impact education and the learning. So.
I was saying when I present or think of problems, I'd like to think or tend to think of solutions. So one of the things that think will be beneficial for teachers, and I don't know if this is a part of teachers' curriculum, but multicultural learning for teachers to understand the different dynamics of students' backgrounds, socioeconomic, spiritual, biological, et cetera, as well as more minority teachers for minority students. I think that is critically important. As a Black male trying to become a therapist, when I work with Black males, it's like a sigh of relief for them to feel seen, heard, and or validated. And I think that same speaks true when we have minority teachers that teach minority students, because those students can feel seen, heard, and validated. And instead of it being you're a suspicion because of this behavior, the conversation then becomes, let's talk about why you're like this. And then you can actually finally get to the root of the problem versus addressing the tip of the iceberg, which is the only thing that you see. And I just wanted to highlight that.
I agree. And I think there are more and more programs that are trying to get more minority teachers in the school system. The program that I went through to get my master's was one of those programs, and there are several in New Jersey that are working towards that. But there's still so many barriers for people of color to get into the education system. But recently there was a big win where they eliminated the praxis test as like one of the barriers. And like for me personally, when I was trying to get into the education system, I failed the praxis test 6 different times. And it caused me to, when I was in undergrad, leave the education program because I couldn't continue on with my classes. And so I ended up having to get my teaching certificate through my master's. But those tests are huge barriers for people of color, not having enough financial assistance. And so there's these programs that are out there that are trying to recruit more teachers of color. So hopefully they continue to get more funding. They continue to get more teachers out there. I think I forgot the exact statistics, but it was like when students of color have teacher of color, at least one, I think it upped their graduation rates. I don't know if it was like by 60% or it might have been like even more. Like they have a higher chance of graduating high school. And so I completely agree. Like it's so important. But it's just also like when teachers get in there, the districts, the admins, they have to do things to retain the teachers and not try to push them out. That's also a really big issue where you have teachers of color in there, but then they're being pushed out because of so many different things. And like depending on the state, like Florida or Texas, all of these things that are being put in place where it's really pushing teachers out, where they can't handle it, they can't deal with it. Like I don't want to be sitting in a classroom and have to tell kids that slavery was an option. So, now I don't want to be here anymore. Now I'm leaving. So it's just all of these things affecting teachers of color being in the mix of education.
Can I say something? I'm
Yes.
I don't know what the population of individuals that do watch this show, but I don't want it to make it seem like any teacher that isn't African American is the problem, because that's not what I'm saying. What I do think is that I do think that coming from a certain background, you have a more in-depth understanding of what you're dealing with when you teach minority students. I'm not saying that any teacher from any background is the issue. In fact, the teachers that EJ have all been white, and they've all been fantastic teachers. And so I wanted to make sure that there's a sense of understanding and allyship when I do say this, but also a sense of understanding what the specific needs of our community are in saying what I have saying. So I wanted to make sure that it doesn't seem like I'm degrading any racial group or any ethnic group with the conversation that we're having.
Absolutely. But I also, like, I agree with what you said. Even if a teacher is white or of a different background, they should still be trained in multicultural education because they're going to encounter different types of students. They're not always going to encounter the same students. And that's when you have issues with, a student comes in and it's a cultural barrier and something's really small, but the teacher doesn't understand it and they take it out on the student or they view it a different way. So now you have all of these kids, they're getting suspended, this is happening, that is happening, maybe because they had an attitude, maybe because they said something that the teacher just didn't understand and took it the wrong way. And so I think it is important, and I don't think anyone should feel offended for being told that they need those trainings. It is important. And as we've seen like time and time again from different things that are on the news about how students are being treated, it's needed. It's absolutely necessary. What advice would you offer to parents who are at the beginning stages? So their kids are really young, maybe they're 2, they're 3, they're at the beginning stages of their children's educational journey, but they want to be an involved parent. They want to be working with their children at home. They want to put their best foot forward. What advice do you have for them?
Make yourself aware and be patient. That, like, I think sometimes we see, especially with social media, like all these child prodigies, and it's like, oh, I want my kid doing multiplication at 2, and I want my kid reading at 3, right? That it's really about just preparing them and giving yourself and your child grace. Because I think, I remember the times where it's like, oh, you don't get it, you're getting in trouble. Why don't you understand this? And it's like, well, that's not helping me understand why 2 + 2 = 4, right? So just giving yourself grace and then equipping yourself with the knowledge that it doesn't have to be perfect, and to be an advocate for your child. And an advocate doesn't just mean go off on the teachers when you feel like things aren't, happening, but it also means not being afraid to ask for an IEP, not being afraid. I think sometimes we're so scared of our kids being labeled that sometimes they don't get the things that they need, right? Like maybe your kid isn't, speaking at 2, right? So make sure that we go get them checked out to be on the safe side, right?
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. And I think a little bit goes a long way, just making yourself available for anything, whether it's to talk about ABCs or to listen to anything that a child wants to listen to. I know when the children were earlier, instead of listening to Jay-Z and all the other things I wanted to listen to, we're listening to these songs. We're listening to these alphabet songs. We're listening to what's that group? We're listening to the Wiggles. So a little bit can go a very long way. Again, it doesn't have to be every day that you're doing these things, but just 5 to 10 minutes a day or 5 to 10 minutes when you do have the time to do it can be very critical. And like my wife said, not being afraid to advocate or ask for the resources. I know one of my biggest fears was that when my son got an IEP, that he would be labeled, that he would have all these different things attached to him solely because he had IEP. And granted, this is from me coming from a social work background, coming from that field and still having those feelings. So as a parent, it's okay to feel the way that you feel, but you also have to work through that as well. So if you have anything that you're concerned about with your child, not being afraid to address the way that you feel and then seeking change so that your child can be better. And then being present, there is no handbook that teaches us how to do all of these things. And I want to make sure everybody is aware of that. Sure, teachers have these curriculums that they can come up with or that they can use or share with others, but there's no handbook that gives us or shows us all the different things that we should do with kids. So use your imagination. Think about yourself as an inner child. Think about the things that you wanted to happen, the things that you wanted to see, those things that did happen and those things that don't happen, and work to make those a reality for your children.
I wanted to circle back to the IEP. How was that process for you guys with getting EJ his IEP?
It was pretty seamless. It was pretty seamless. Honestly, once we had worked through our own personal feelings about it, it was kind of like, yes, let's hurry up and get this IEP so we can make sure that he has a seat in this school. But when we did have our meeting, it was very clear. The communication was very transparent. I think again, both my wife and I, she has her master's, I have my master's. We know that African American community education is a growing thing, and women, African American women, are the highest educated group in the African American community. I say that knowing the population that I work with and knowing the population that I aspire to, knowing that there's challenges that we have as a people. But because of our educational experiences, we were able to have those candid conversations and ask those tough questions when we were in that space. And we were able to be candid about our own personal feelings that made it easier for the staff to address or quell any anxieties that we had. So he had his assessment. They were very clear and transparent about what the assessment was, what they were testing for, what the results were, and then what the timeline would be like for placement in school. It was a very seamless process. It really helped with quelling my own personal feelings, personal negative feelings about the process. And we were grateful once it did happen. And even so much so, I think this year he had an extra day, extra time added to his IEP where he can get more service time during the academic school year. So for me, and I think for mom as well, was a seamless, transparent process. And I think the transparency made the seamlessness more easy.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think y'all the first people I heard to have a seamless IEP process. Um, it's usually so hard, especially for kindergarten and preschool to get the services that they need. But it could also just be with the community that I've worked with because I've only worked in an underserved community. And so to get the process, for my students, two of my students, no, three of my students last year, it took 2 full years to get them the services they needed. And even then, when we actually got to the IEP meeting, almost two full years later, some of them were denied services and they were not able to get what they needed. And we really had to fight, me, the parents, other individuals who worked in the school building, we had to fight to get them the services. But I'm so glad that your process was seamless. It needs to be like that everywhere. And hopefully we can get to that point someday.
Yeah, I mean, I think the leg up that we have is that in my social work, I worked in foster care, and so I collaborated with schools, and I sat in on MDTs and IEP meetings, and so that experience helped me ask what I would probably say is the right question. But I feel like for a parent who may or may not have that experience, if they don't have the right question or the right knowledge or that experience, they may not know that these are questions that I should ask. So I think that probably helped and gave us a leg and like, oh, they actually know what's kind of happening, what the process is. And so that made it more seamless. But I don't think that that should be a prerequisite in order for there to be a seamless process.
Yeah, the knowledge should be given to them. Like if they don't know, they should be being told what to expect, how to go about it. So as your children grow in their educational journey, how do you foresee your role changing or evolving?
I am terrified of new math. And even I think, yeah, I think that's the part that I'm most nervous about is like the new math and stuff. Because like Eric said, I am like reading language arts type of person. I am not the math person, so I'm scared of that. Like I remember in 6th grade, my parents couldn't help me with my math anymore. Well, at least my dad couldn't help me with my math anymore. So I'm very aware that that's probably going to happen, and that's when Erica's going to have to take over. Other than that, I think one of the things that I'm being mindful of for myself is like watching them grow, is because we had an early reader and because we had someone who was good at math and he's able to pick up on all those things, making sure that we're not putting those same expectations on her because she's the next one. Is like, you're gifted in your own way, whatever that's going to look like, right? But also making sure, because EJ was 2 in the pandemic, so we were home, all the time. So it was different ways that we could pour into them that I can't pour into her in the same way. So I think those are some of my biggest concerns, is making sure that I'm doing enough, because I'm like, I don't want to not do enough, but also being cognizant that I know that I can't give the same attention to her as I did to him, because I'm literally home all day with him because of the pandemic.
And I feel like depending on how long I'm at my school as a school counselor, like any and all things I'm going to do is going to come from a parental lens first, but naturally it's going to come from a school counseling lens with any and all things that happen with him in education. And it's not just focusing on any negative things, it's also focusing on the positive things and highlighting what those things are, and being sure that he has an advocate, because I can think of inevitable challenges that most, if not all, school-age children face. So that's really kind of where my mind is, like, oh, make sure I take my school counseling hat off and just focus on being dad. But 2, as it relates to academia, I do see myself becoming that math science tutor and really trying to have so much fun with him. So when I worked at another program, a lot of things that I did was science projects where I taught about jet propulsion, where I taught about a lot of different things. And so really stepping in and diving in with that with him. I know I had looked at trying to do that at an early age, but all the projects that I could think of were a lot more advanced. So I'm really excited about being able to have hands-on experiences about learning with him, and then being able to help him understand all of those different concepts. Math and science were my 2 best subjects, AP math, AP science. And so being able to pour into him what I have available and then try to do so in a way that's understandable for not just EJ, but both for EJ and Amari. And like mom said, making sure that those same expectations and standards that have been set by EJ, we give and allow Amari enough opportunity to thrive in her own way. We aren't parents that tend to do that, but it's also something that we are mindful of and make sure that we don't have those same expectations. They're 2 very different children, 2 very different ways of learning. And so making sure that they both have their own space to grow into their own individual selves.
And it's so nice that you guys like both have your own strengths, you with science and math, Petrea with like literacy, so that you can balance each other out really nicely. And that new math,
Oh, yeah.
new math is serious. Even in 1st grade, that new math is serious because it's like, why can't we just do it the regular way? But hopefully, you guys will be able to keep up.
Can I add also, we're both artsy. I mean, music is all throughout our household. Well, I'm artsy. I'm a musician and a singer, and so I want to make sure that I highlight the music and the arts. I know STEM, math, science, technology, engineering, they always get a highlight in academic settings, and I know there are several schools that are without arts programs, and I do want to highlight that arts is something that we do at our house, and it's not every day, it's not every week, but there are times where I'm on the piano and my kids are on their drums and or the guitar, have their instruments, or we just play music, and I want to make sure that the arts are highlighted, that's also something that we're going to incorporate, whether that's at home or whether at school. Both our kids will do a sport, both our kids will do some type of instrument. You want to make sure that they're diverse individuals. We want to make sure they have an opportunity to experience all the things that we had and then all the things that we didn't have. So we want to make sure that they're just well equipped. But I did want to make sure that I highlighted that I'm musically talented, and I'm gonna make sure my kids are exposed to music as well, whether they're participants or whether they just enjoy it recreation. Arts is gonna be something that we push in our house as well.
I love that. They're going to be so well-rounded.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any last words, any more advice that you would like to give to anybody out there who's listening? Just all around education, around parenting, just anything else you want to add?
Get a village, get a therapist, talk to somebody. You don't have to do this by yourself, and it's better to have a team that you can bounce ideas off of. Get a mom group, a dad group. All those things help. And don't be afraid to make a mistake. That's how we learn and grow.
Absolutely. I'd like to take the moment to just uplift our dads. I know a lot of Black dads don't get that image and the acknowledgement that could be provided to dads. Where I'm at, I see a lot of Black dads. Being a Black dad, I want to make sure that you're highlighted, emphasized. If you don't have a role, carve out your role. I come from a university where our motto is find a way or make one. And so, for all the dads who are involved in parenting, education, or academics, find a way or make one to pave your way and carve your way into your child's life. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think everyone else will too. I really appreciate it. And to everyone who is watching, thank you for taking the time out to watch Empowered Parent Series this episode. And if you aren't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.